Welcome everyone to Researching a Legacy Experience, Living the Legacy Life. It's great to have you here. I'm Stephen Hobbs. I am with Younger, Older, Elder, the YouTube channel, and Wealth Movement. And today, what we're going to do is take a look at the content asset management system from a safety perspective. And what this is one of the frameworks and tools that I use in assisting those of you who are interested in legacy and want to move forward. And this is particularly important for those who may have already started something around legacy or are at a point where they want to just start letting people know about their ideas, their preliminary ideas, and they're wanting to create some content as assets, manage the system to get that out there. And I'm going to take a look at the beginning of this because I've been asked a couple of times, what's it all about? I read what you've got going, but what is it? And I said, okay, well, this Saturday I will shoot. It's Saturday, here we are. And I'm just going to go over it with you so that you might understand a little bit more about it. Now, there is a possibility of a guest popping in. I've invited someone to drop in and sort of have a peer-to-peer conversation around what's here. So we'll see if that unfolds. Now, for us to get going, the key element here from a content asset management system safety point of view, I'm going to be making some suggestions, and therefore I'm going to ask you to consider what might be of use to you, helpful to you. I'm not saying that you must take it as is, follow the steps. That's not what it's about. I'm offering more insights that you can start to think about and play with as you're moving forward. And if you want to think about this, there's what's called landscape. That's when you start looking at anything from this sort of perspective. And then there's portrait when you're looking at it from this perspective. So you're thinking about an 8.5 by 11. So this is a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If you turn it slightly, you get a portrait 8.5 by the 11. And CAMSS, which is the short form of it, is very much a landscape approach to this whole storyline. And with that, what you're really doing is, while I'm setting this out, and this is a framework and model and steps that you can take up, there is going to be a flavor of this being more like a map with some diagrams and some actions that you can take. So I just want to acknowledge that, yes, it has its framework and models, but today we're going to play with it and just take it and be a little bit more informal with it and enjoying it. If I was actually working with someone, I would actually go through specific steps, but I wanted to give you a little bit more of a background, informal feeling for what CAMSS is about. So this is what it looks like. Remember I said framework and models. This is what it looks like from a high level point of view. You can certainly stop and come back and take a look at it, but I'm going to sort of focus in on these two aspects, the story for the world and the delivery channel. So the story for the world is to get you set up and get you going. Delivery channel, there's an interesting take on that I want to share with you. But also, I want to go over a little bit from the felt safety point of view. Now, before we dive into it completely, I just want to let you know who I am because you may not have met me before. So I'm Stephen Hobbs. I'm with the Younger, Older, Elder, the YouTube channel, and I'm the CEO and Chief Experience Officer of Wealth Movement, WELLTH, about well-being and well living. I've been in this entrepreneurial space 35 plus years now. I started it actually 40 some years ago, but it was more sort of filling in, doing some summer contracts and and doing it, but I went full time about 35 years ago. And it's been an interesting ride, and there's a legacy story that goes with that that I'll share another time. If not, on Wednesdays, I post a sort of get to know the legacy mentor, being I, and share some insights about what we're doing. But I do consider myself a legacy mentor, a guide on the ride, and supporting those of you who are living a legacy life or wish to live a legacy life, and you're looking at what would be some tips, tools, techniques, technologies that you can use to be able to set up the platform for your legacy. And so I just want to acknowledge that. So that's a little bit about who I am. And when I move into doing CAMS, that's one of the first things I do is I have a person just acknowledge who are you? And what they do is they give a little bit about their background. But I'm also it's important to understand what is their first name and what format of their name. Like, for example, I'm Stephen. There's some of us Stevens who would say, oh, just call me Steve. I have chosen to go with Stephen. I leaned into that about 10 years ago and said I would prefer to be full name Stephen, because you appreciate hearing your name, and when people say, hi Stephen, well, how's it going? There's something to be said for being recognized, and I like that. Now, I have some nicknames. When I was a whitewater rafting guide, I had a nickname for the river. And so I answered to that because it was inappropriate. But here I am on the channel doing the work I'm doing. And so I have Stephen. And I would ask the same of you. What would be the name you would want to be called by? And then one of the other things I would have you look at is what might be your superpower. What is it that you know that you contribute in being for the world with the planet from the whole? What is that superpower? And what I'm asking, it's through the lens of fast thinking, which is heart, wholeheartedness, fast thinking, rather than slow thinking where you're doing it more from your head. So I'm looking for the initial responses, and then we can come back and do the slower think through. So fast thinking heart. And so people would answer, what's their superpower? Because I just want them to say it out loud, but also so I can hear it as well. And with that, then I go, okay, if that's what your superpower is, let's just put that to the side for a second. Let's see what happens as we move through the rest of CAMS. So, from a superpower, my perspective, one of the things that I recognize is that I'm a great mapper, a multi-dimensional mapper. I have created a dimensional language that I use to look at things one dimension, three dimensions, actually up to about 10 dimensions. And it's a way for me to look at what's going on from different angles. And therefore, I also am a great researcher about the search for things and using this visual language to do that searching. So my superpower is this multidimensional mapping researcher. And it does get me into some difficulties at times because I forget that I've gone and I'm off doing some conversations in this sort of multi-dimensional way, and I haven't landed, I haven't grounded myself with those who are around. And that's one of the reasons why I ask, who am I at the very beginning? So who are you when you come in, and then ask what's your superpower, just to get some sense of what's going on. So with that, as we turn into this diagram and working with it, what I want to do is I just want to say is there's a sense of felt safety that goes with this storyline. And the felt safety comes from the perspective of how is it that you feel as you move in? What is it that would make you safe to share fast thinking, slow thinking? What would that be? And that's a question I would ask of you, and you would give your response. So I get a sense of, okay, where do we go? What are sort of boundaries that I would work with? Is there topics you don't want to talk about or go into? I've learned this along the way as I make sure that there's some sense of that felt safety. There's a safe system that we're going to work with, and I'm going to use safer practices as you do as well. So there's a story of safety here. Again, I'm going to do a longer video on this topic around felt safety and legacy life. I think there's something here that I want to expand on for you as we move forward on another Saturday. So the key here now is from the perspective of my name is, what do you do? I've covered that. The felt safety, the safe systems, the safer practices. What's your superpower? And here is where we start to really bring it to life. And this is me asking you from a evidence, education, and experiences perspective, what are three evidence markers? What are three markers that you have evidence that over the course of your life up until this day are significant markers? Oh, yes, yes, yes. So for example, I did my EdD, my doctorate of education, is a 10-dimensional learning framework. That's a key marker for me because that's when I solidified that visual language that I use in creating these kind of frameworks and tools and maps and diagrams. So that would a marker for me. So I asked for three of those markers from you so that you have something to write down and go, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. These would be three things that I could weave into my story of legacy. Great. It may actually be a contribution because of that marker, that something that you've done is that maybe you've been a project manager for 20 years and you got some really great skills and you want to share it. Maybe you have an interest in HO train sets and you're going, oh, hang on a minute. I think I could probably set something up of a YouTube channel talking about HO train sets. That possibility exists as well. So sort of see how it feels for you looking at it through those markers. Then the next thing I would ask is, what are three education approaches that you prefer? And education approaches: trainer, facilitator, consultant, coach, mentor, weaver, celebrant, navigator, any of those kind of terms. You could writer, sculptor, you could write, you could use those ones as well. Because what I'm looking for is, what are your preferred educating approaches? How is it that you would want to share what you know? Because when you go to create your legacy life and you're going to share it with others, that adventure together, then there is this discover, shape, and share. And therefore, what are your preferred ways to share? I'm going to come back to that one a little bit later because there's an important point that I want to make. So having got those three education approaches, what are three experience stories you could share? And there are what are called signature stories and origin stories. With my business, there's an origin story around the sense of roadblocks and having to understand patience, flexibility, and discretion in a war zone. And what did that do for me? But there's a signature story inside that origin story around my 3-minute mentor. And I have these stories from my experiences that I can share. So what are three that you have? So 3 markers, 3 education approaches, 3 experience stories. So what you have now is you have the beginning of some content that you can tap into, draw from, to work with, to be able to share, to figure out how to bring what it is that's in your head, heart, and hands to the foreground. So those pieces are there for you as well. Now, having gotten to that point, then what we need to do is think about, okay, great. I've got a sense of who I am and what my superpower is. And now would be, who do I want to help? What I, who's going to benefit from my legacy? Now, writing a memoir, writing a recipe book within the family and friends. Who am I going to help? Family and friends. Ah, there's something I'd like to do at the youth center. Okay. There's something I'd like to do on an international basis that has an environmental, ecological inspiration to it. Okay. So I help who? That's a question you can ask yourself is through living my legacy life, I help who? And get as much information down as you can about that group and write it down. And that's why this is fast thinking. You would just be writing it down really quickly so that you can come back to it later and take a look at it and dive a little bit deeper. And then I would ask what they need and want of who you help. What do they need and want? Because it's an important question. If you understand what they need or want or desire or look for or want to have, whatever phrasing seems to work best for you, when you understand that point about who they are and how you might be able to help them, then you're opening up more possibilities of looking at this superpower, this legacy superpower you have, these experiences, these education approaches, this evidence markers, how you might be able to interact with them and be able to help out. So this becomes an important question. And as you set this up, it gives you an opportunity to see what's possible. Okay. So with that, now I'm going to open up the next piece is that in this legacy life, and you're going to help them, then there is a sense of a preferred future and a current reality. So the preferred future that that person has that you're interacting with, that group that you're interacting with, they have some sense of, oh, this is what I desire, I want, I need. They've expressed it to you. You have a sense of your own expression of preferred future as I want to live my legacy life and I want to share these products or services or experiences with others. And just like you, they have a current reality of where they are. They may be completely starting off. They may be partway down the path and you can help them move farther. They may be looking to up level, upgrade. You're sitting there going, I may be just getting started, or maybe I've written a book, or I have been writing some blog articles. I want to extend what I'm doing. So we're playing off this sense of the preferred future and the current reality to the extent that you're going, okay, what is it that's happening here? You're sort of going back and forth, this sort of infinity, and figuring out what's taking place. So if you were to ask yourself, okay, this is great of the preferred future and the current reality, what you're attempting to do here is say, okay, what's my intention? What is it that I want to improve, focus, and strengthen? That's what the red IFS is. What is it you want to improve, focus, and strengthen? That would be an intention you can put out to fulfill the preferred future of those that you want to interact with. And then what you can do is you can say to yourself, well, what's my current reality? What am I having to pay attention to from a truth, trust, and transparency point of view? So, again, what's taking place is that you are moving back and forth between them in living your legacy life by sharing what it is that you wish to share and be able to say, hey, great, here's what's possible. I have this sense of there's a preferred future that I have that entwines with those persons who would like to benefit, those that I am meeting with, and I have to pay attention to where they are, but I also have to pay attention to where I am as I'm unfolding this. Now, the IFS, that's a really great way to think about your imagined future, is this preferred future. What do you want to improve, focus, and strengthen? And if you were to answer that question quickly, then you can write down a response. But also, you're balancing that off against this truth, trust, and transparency. And on an everyday basis, think of it this way: truth is about know and like. Then you go to trust, and transparency is your comment share. I think you know that sort of phrasing connected to social media. So that know, like, trust, comment, share is really an extended form of truth, trust, and transparency. So of what you're going to do, be it of truth, so that they can trust you, and therefore you can be transparent, and they can in return do the same with you. So that is what's possible here. As we take a look at the next thing is, we also have to remember is that this preferred future, okay, has some sense of mystery. You don't know it all. So even with this CAMS of preparing and getting your content ready and forming it up as assets, this preferred future, the persons you're interacting with, there's still mystery there. And sometimes you got to give it a go. It may not work. You give it a go after you reframed it, reimagined it, and just keep walking forward. But if you're going to do that, make sure that from a history point of view, you're bringing the best of that history with you. I would suggest you don't bring the luggage that weights you down. Don't do that. Bring the, oh, that worked, that worked. That's why I asked you about the markers, your education approach, your experience stories. Bring that forward as you're taking a look at it. So in a sense, there's a little bit of this here as well, all right? But what you're going to do is you're going to really take a look at and own the dynamics of that mystery and really play with that. And sometimes there is some fear that goes with that. And unfortunately, that drops some people off and go, oh, I don't want to die. And I go, just remember, fear is really about you perceiving something in the future going to cause you more pain than pleasure. I attribute that to Dr. John D. Martini, and he's on YouTube. I'd certainly encourage you to look him up. And when he shared that with me in a course that I was taking, I went, I get it. And then, oh, hang on a minute. If they have fear, maybe do they have a desire? Can I play the desire and fear off through the feelings of curiosity? I went, got it. So if someone expresses fear, how might I give them a sense of desire and bring curiosity in? If someone is really into the desire, I might just ask them, is there anything that might get in the way without using the word fear? Because I want to balance it off and then use curiosity to open up that possibility as well. So what we're doing here is we're really thinking through, okay, this preferred future in history. And the more that you document that so that you can understand these questions that you might put forward. Why am I doing what I'm doing? How am I to do it? And who am I to be doing it with whom? Because that's the quest that you're on, the questions, three main questions. And they are, well, they will serve you really well over time if you ask, why is it that I want to live my legacy life? And why is it that I want to interact with that group? Why does that group want to interact with me? How do I want to set up my legacy life, my legacy projects, stories, contributions? How would they feel about getting it delivered in this way? Who is it out there who wants to benefit from this and understand it more, but also understand myself from a self-care point of view? Who am I to be doing this? And is there anything that's going to get in the way of that? And therefore, these questions become really important. And they suggest you're on a quest, you are walking a path. That's why I will use walking and connect living a legacy life with walking and pathway, because you're on this quest. And what that'll do is it'll bring you to looking at it. And I have an addition here that I want to offer to you, is that this line here, all right, is about message. This line here is about media. And this line here is about market. So if we get into this market media message mix, okay, into marketing and looking at it from that point of view, this is just a way of suggesting to you, oh, okay, there's some things I have to think about as I'm moving forward. What's the market? And that helps me understand, okay, who's my audience? And if I'm marketing into that audience, what does that mean? Then what media channels am I going to use? And what's the message that I want to take out? Now, here's the beauty of this, that from a who perspective, you've really got to understand the media you're going to use. The channels that you're going to go through to get to the persons that you want to interact with. Also, how you want to interact, what channels do you want to use, then it becomes an important storyline. Because if you don't match up the who with the media, you will find that there will be some disintegration and or roadblocks will end up, path blocks will end up in front of you. Equally is that from a how point of view, if you're helping a person to understand how to do what you're asking them to do, is the message delivered in a way that connects with the how or the why or the what is happening for, because if that message doesn't link up with the how and the how links up with the message, you're going to get into some difficulty as well. So you can probably appreciate that with the why, you have to make sure that the why of the market and your why are going to match up. Because if you get all of this working for you, then the content, the assets that you will create to be able to manage out into that audience will and get them to know and like you, trust you, comment and share, get involved with you. And therefore, the suggestions you make, they'll take them into consideration. And when they do that, they may convert into getting involved, or they might just say, hey, I really like what you're doing, and give you some feed forward, whatever it might be, depending on the kind of project you have. You may have a project that requires a bit more formal marketing, and therefore direct response marketing techniques would work. Maybe you're just doing something of volunteer capacity at a youth center, and you volunteered into a group from an education point of view, and you don't need a lot of formality. So again, playing with it, and that's why taking up a legacy mentor space and going through this and just tailoring it, customizing it for you is a great way to move forward. And I have that availability that I open up for you, and you can find a bit of information down in the description at this point in time. But there's something here that is important. It goes back to the education approaches I mentioned earlier. I said, what are your education approaches? What you also have to remember is that, are your education approaches preferred by your audience to receive what you want to share with them? If there's anything that I've learned along the way, because I'm a visual learner and fall into being a visual presenter, I sometimes miss out the auditory persons, because I'm using words like I draw this, and can you see this? Can you see how this unfolds? Do you see how this moves along? And I'm using language like that without taking into consideration how they're listening to it. I just do it all visually. So I learned my lesson along the way, and I make sure that I bring in words that would suggest listening, what's the story I'm sharing with you at this point in time? What are you hearing me say? And I'll open up conversation that way. And similar to kinesthetic, those who really like to get into action, I make sure that there's ways for people to get involved. Now, here on YouTube, doing something like this kind of live workshop, it's not as easy. However, there are things like fast thinking, slow thinking. So fast, write down as it goes, answer questions, and then come back and do it later. All of this CAMS that I have here, I've created a card game. And what I'll be doing is sort of like playing cards that you can then get, and then you can lay them out, and it forms the framework, the models. And then if you wanted to, you could shuffle them and say, okay, which one do I have to pay attention to, or draw three, and what's their connection? And so I can bring it into the hands so that you can see it. You can then listen to your conversation if you're having it with someone else, or your own inner conversation, and sort of open up the possibilities of VAK, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. But I wanted to bring that up is because if you don't take that into consideration, again, you can fall. So make sure that your education approaches aligns with the want and the need, that in the preferred style that they want to learn with you. And then the other question I would ask is, on whose terms are you delivering it? If you're pushing it, it's on your terms. If they're pulling it, it's on their terms. And if there's anything that I've learned over the years, it's easier to pull than to push a rope. So if I'm attempting to push it on, sort of like the rope, if I help them to learn to pull it, oh, okay, yes, okay, and off we go. And that makes it a lot more useful for persons. So again, think about it through that lens, because what can happen is that you are going to bring all of this to the foreground. This quest, these three questions, this market media message mix, they are layered in this content that you want to create, because they're going to become assets that you can manage out. Now, what is important here is that it's sort of like looking at this doorway. You're going, oh, okay, I see the tree out there. And so my intention maybe is to go sit by that tree. But what's outside that door? Do we know? Bit of mystery. History says, well, I can walk out that door and I can go straight to that tree and sit by that tree. Possibility. But we don't know for sure. So sometimes you take those steps along the way. You lay down those path stones that take you to that door frame. And maybe just before you take that full step out of the door frame, you just check. And that is the reminder of the safety, the safe systems, safer practices. So don't go running out that door thinking, I'll get right to that tree. You may have to go, okay, I may step quickly to the door, check what's going on, hit the grass, and then run to the tree. But what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm prepared, I have prevention, and the practice I take up is going to take care of myself. So I just wanted to acknowledge that of what's happening here. You can't go full tilt and everything unfolds for you. Sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to give it a bit of a slower think. Sometimes fast works, but a slower think of the whole. So when you open up CAMSS for yourself here, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, let me go through it quickly. Let me see what's going on. Then I can come back and just slow it down just a little bit. Because I always find sometimes my first responses are some of my better responses. So again, thinking about it from that perspective. So one of the things to remember in all of this is that shift happens. And that's part of the mystery because you don't always quite know how it's going to unfold. But as you start paying attention to managing your assets, the content you have, you can start to see where shift might start to take place and how might that influence what you're doing. Do you have to do some kind of course corrections? Do you have to do a possibility pivot? Do you have to do patient adjustments? And I'm playing with some words here, granted. Shift happens. Well, yeah, it may happen and you're going, and you may not have seen it. Course corrections, you're going, hang on a minute, something's happening, and you do a course correction. A possibility pivot is you're going, possibility, I don't know if it's a yes or no. Let me do some aspect. Let me search out a little bit more. Patient adjustments. I find that I'm always doing those patience, flexibility, discretion adjustments because that's just how life is. I'm interacting with other humans, and therefore there's some sense of them getting involved with it. So that these phrases are here just to remind you, yes, you can do the fast, but also do your slow as you're moving through it. And with that, what I wanted to do is say to you, if there's any questions that you might have at this point in time, all right, you can certainly just put them into the question box. And if it's later, great, I will get to them and I will answer them as they come in and see what we can do to help you out. So with that, there is the really this really great understanding is that CAMS is a way for you to think about your content asset management system from a safety point of view. And I bring this forward again is that I only wanted to speak about the content and assets. So remember, where does the content come from? The content comes from understanding what's taking place in relationship to the whole. And another day, I'll do the other two areas. And therefore, my name, what do you do? That's content. My appreciation of the felt safety, the safe systems, safer practices that I want to weave in. There is what's my superpower from an experience, education, and evidence point of view. They are who do I help and what do they need or want? Understanding what kind of content needs to get created. There is that, well, if there's a preferred future and I have a current reality, what's happening there? So I can set up my intention and attention, intention of what I want to improve, focus, and strengthen, my attention to truth, trust, and transparency. And what that does is, okay, there's some mystery and history here. The mystery, I can do my best to sort of figure out what's going on. And the history is, what am I going to bring that's going to be of the greatest use? And when you have all of that, you can start asking questions like why, how, and who. This is all content that you've got access to that you can then say, okay, how do I turn it into assets? And from that to deliver it out through this market media message mix. And again, we can do a workshop on this if that's something you want to dig a little bit more into. And understanding is, yes, there's a door there. And how is it that I'm going to go through that door as I move forward therein? Because you're going to hit things like shift happens, course corrections, possibility pivots, patient adjustments. They are going to be there for you. This is all content, and what you can do is turn this into assets. But there's something that is also really important, and I'm going to do a little bit of another workshop with, it's in connection with the other ones, and it's to do with this part of what's taking place. Now, let me just bring it up here. It's around the delivery channel. Now, down below in the description, there'll be a link to where you can grab a PDF. It's a very simple PDF of 150 delivery channels. And what I do is I have each person who's gotten to the point of, okay, I got some content, I can start to develop some assets. What delivery channels would I want to go out? In other words, media, what delivery channels do I want to work with, so that I can get ready to manage that to interact with who I want to interact with and who wants to interact with me. Now, of these, what will happen is I would ask that you would scan it first and go, okay, that seems to be the ones that I would use. Then go back and go through it slower and say to yourself, are these delivery channels those that my audience, those who I'm going to interact with, would find me through? Again, that education approach, the channel you're going to use has to line up with them as well. There's something I've sort of figured out over time here, is that a channel like YouTube doesn't have a lot of videos about legacy. They're there, but they're not getting a lot of views versus the entertainment channels or the edutainment channel. And I went, that's kind of interesting. And I said, why? What might that be? Well, it could be is because of the talking head style, or here are the 5 tips, or here's the 5 tools, versus going, could I do a vlog, a video blog, where I invite people in to be able to have conversations? And so people can drop in and listen. And if I was to include some whiteboard tools and techniques, maybe that would open up some possibilities. And therefore, I'm going to do some shifting in my presentation style. Now, it'll probably take me a couple of weeks to get it all organized up. But this is an observation I made, is I like shooting videos and sharing tips and tools, but it doesn't mean it always lands with you, the audience. And therefore, I have to adjust my delivery channel format to have that work. One of the other things that I found along the way is a lot of people enjoy books, but when it comes to the how-to books, they don't want those books long. And so I've figured out a way in which to do the how-to with prompts, so that the essence of maybe 10, 12 pages is up front, and then you've got ways in which to practice the concepts and the practices. And writing books, often they're called low content books. So that's another possibility. So I'm going to open up this one far more the next time to be able to help you understand it. We can go through a number of them. But in the comments down below, what would be your favorite choices of delivery channel? I'd be curious. Please let me know down below. So with that, I'm going to say take care. I'm going to wish you the best. And I would also encourage you to keep thinking about, oh, what else does he have on younger, older, elder? And come on over and see what's here. And there's lots of variation. There's the prompt videos, about a minute, a little less than a minute. Grab your legacy journal, listen to the prompt, write down a thought. Do a fast thought, then come and do a slow thought. There are Wednesdays where I share a little bit more from my heart, from my perspective about what's going on, what I'm learning. And then there's the lives on Saturday. There are workshops, or I may start turning them a little bit more into that vlog style. I'll see how that goes. And then there's other videos I attempt to get out on a Tuesday and a Thursday, so that there is some tips and tools and techniques. And usually those videos are between 13 and 21 minutes long. And often they come about because people are asking me questions. And so I'm attempting to answer the questions through a video. So that gives you a bit of a sense of what's available here. And I thank you for joining me today. I wish you the best, and take care.